All right, y'all, welcome to the show. So today we're going to discuss Morning Joe coping and seething over Biden's low poll numbers relative to Donald Trump. They're not buying it. They're not buying the fact that Biden is down, even though the mountain of evidence is now as tall as Everest. So we'll talk about that. We also have Biden sends out a pathetic letter basically begging young people to support him. If only you were in some position of power where you could do something to maybe earn their votes. I know, crazy. We also have Republicans getting together a committee. Why? To cut Social Security. I mean, we're talking about this in 2023, but we talked about it in 2022, 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, like all the way back to like the 1990s. We've been having this same damn conversation. And then later on, you're not going to want to miss this one. North Korea releases an amazing propaganda video where they show Kim Jong-un voting in the election. And, it's so amazing. Like, I can't wrap my mind around the fact that anybody thought it was a good idea in North Korean positions of power. Like, I find that incomprehensible because it's the fakest thing I've ever seen. But they were like, nailed it, run it. People are going to know that we're a vibrant democracy. Wait for it. So we'll talk about that and much more. So everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe, it helps out massively in the algorithm and it doesn't cost you anything at all. And of course, I'm now trying to catch back up to my wife's channel. Her and Saga over at Breaking Points. They recently surpassed me. Totally unacceptable. I love you, Crystal, with all my heart. But also, I want to be in front of you in the sub count. Okay? So everybody hook a brother up with a sub and make it so that I eventually now surpass them. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into it. The folks over at Morning Joe, I mean, this goes without saying, but this is like establishment central. You are going to get basically the purest version of corporate Democrat talking points over on Morning Joe. Now, it's funny, too, because Joe Scarborough used to be a Republican, but now he's like a standard resistance liberal Democrat, and he's basically like on the Biden cheerleading squad. So they're going to have a conversation here about all these polls that have come out recently that show Joe Biden down to Trump. And they're going to try to say, don't believe your lying eyes. It's not true. So let's watch and we'll react to it.
I remember Mike Barnacle as we got down the home stretch of the polls. And I remember seeing a poll that showed Joe Biden ahead by 13 points in Wisconsin. And I just tweeted out at that moment, I don't believe any of the polls. And sure enough, they really were. A lot of these state polls, especially in the upper Midwest, way off. And then you have this insanity. And this gets to the point of Molly's piece. On election night, several weeks ago, we had real American voters going to real voting booths. And we were going to have all the real data from a real election for networks to go over. And another network, whom we won't name, decided that on that night, they were going to drop a poll at 7 p.m. when the voting booths closed, and they could have actually reported on real numbers. And what did the poll show? Joe Biden, it's terrible. It's the end of the world. By the way, all of these polls that are like, you read the headline, it goes, oh, the worst news ever for Joe Biden. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. He was riding his bike in Delaware and a comet dropped on him, crushing him to death. And then I open up the link and I look at it and they show me 3 polls where the president of the United States is within the margin of error of a crazy, dangerous man who isn't even really in the front of people's minds right now. And Mike, I just sit there and think, wait a second. This network had real human beings to talk about, but instead of dealing with voters, they wanted to talk about a poll that would push their narrative about how bad Joe Biden was doing, when in fact, voters from Virginia to Ohio to Kentucky overwhelmingly affirmed just how well the Democrats were doing swimming against the tide.
So his claim is, hey, man, Democrats, I don't know why you guys are freaking out. We've had a bunch of elections lately, and Democrats are winning. So your fear that, like, oh, my God, Biden's so weak, he's going to lose to Trump. Like, what are you talking about? The actual real-world evidence cuts in the direction that maybe Democrats are sitting even more pretty than you think. Okay, so let me respond to that. Here's the problem with that argument. Generic Democrats, when you poll people and ask, what do you think about generic Democrat versus generic Republican? Generic Democrat is winning all the time now. All the time. When you poll Trump versus generic Democrat for president, generic Democrat crushes Trump by double digits. So he makes it seem like, oh my God, the polls haven't been accurate. Well, they actually have been when it comes to generic Democrat. Like, generic Democrat is succeeding colossally. But once you ask about Biden specifically, that's when the number implodes. Now, okay, Biden against Trump, a guy with 91 criminal charges, a guy who says we should suspend the Constitution, a guy who's planning on doing Project 2025, which is the total destruction of the administrative and regulatory state. Biden should be up 15 points on that guy. See, this is the thing that drives me crazy, is like the normalization of like the super tight elections. Because, I mean, obviously, we're all too young to live this firsthand, but you can go read a textbook and learn the reality of this. When FDR was president, he won 4 times. The Republicans were like, we need to do term limits because we'll never beat these guys because they're too popular. FDR won 4 times. He held 80% of the House and 80% of the Senate at one point. It was crushing victories as far as the eye could see. Why? Because he was actually delivering for people. So people were like, okay, we're going to vote for you. Biden is a little bit down to a guy with 91 criminal charges who was just found liable of committing fraud. I don't know, like, that seems like a big deal to me. That seems like a big deal to me. Now, I know that he's saying, well, I don't believe the polls, but like I'm trying to point out to him, the polls are actually correct that generic Democrats beat generic Republicans, and that's what we've seen in these recent elections. It's true that it's maybe a little understated in the polls, but again, the main point here is generic Democrat is polling well, and generic Democrats are winning elections. When it comes to Trump versus Biden specifically, it's the opposite, right? You could have a scenario, guys, where down ballot Democrats do better, but Trump wins the presidency. You can have that. You can have that. So this idea like, oh, I don't believe the polls at all, I don't agree. I mean, I think you can and should look at it with a grain of salt. I think it's good for what it is, which is a general indicator. So there's a lot more to it than what he says, but his like total poll denialism is honestly silly. So even when you like the big example of like, oh my God, the polls are horrible and they're never right, that like when that narrative first started getting out there was after the 2016 election. But to be fair, the polls weren't that off in 2016. You had all the pollsters say, oh, you know, Hillary's going to beat Trump. But when you actually looked at what the polls were saying and what the vote count was when all was said and done, it's actually very close. Hillary beat Trump by like 3 million votes in the popular vote. And, you know, that's kind of right in line with where the polls were nationally. The issue was that in the specific swing states is where Trump, like where he needed to get support to win, is exactly where he got support and where he edged out Hillary. Now, have the polls been perfect? No. But have they been totally useless? No. So in 2016, there was a there was a slight overstatement to how good Democrats would do. But in the election since then, it's been the opposite. They've been slightly overstating how well Republicans are doing. But it's still generally a good barometer, right? So, and I was going based off the polls when I predicted that there wasn't going to be a red wave. Everybody around me was saying red wave, red wave, red wave. I was like, I don't know about that. And I was going based off of the polls. I was going based off of the evidence that we had. So to respond more directly here, I want to show you the numbers that he's poo-pooing. So let's start with this. Real Clear Politics. This is Trump versus Biden, general election. Now, to be fair, it is true that 2 polls just came out, Economist YouGov and Morning Consult, where Biden's up 2 in one of them and Biden's up 1 in the other. These are the best polls for him in a while. Because as you see, before then, it goes Trump plus 4, Trump plus 6, Trump plus 2, Trump plus 6, Trump plus 2, Trump plus 4, Trump plus 2, Trump plus 2. So Trump went on a streak there of like really beating him in every poll nationally. Now, I'm going to get to the states in just a second because that's what matters more. But now you might look at this and say, well, that's Trump versus Biden head-to-head. Well, you need to add in Cornel West, for example. Okay, well, when you do that, it's Trump plus 2, Trump plus 2, Trump plus 1, Trump plus 1, to an average of Trump plus 1.5. So all of the polls have Trump with a slight lead when you have Cornel West in the race. And when you add Kennedy in the race, you have similar scenarios. So the most recent poll from Harvard-Harris, Trump plus 8, Trump plus 2, Trump plus 1, Trump plus 1. The best poll for Biden was October 17th. Biden plus 7, Biden plus 1, Biden plus 1 before then. So look, overall, you have a situation where Trump is up like about 2 points on average when you look at the recent polling, okay? But here's the problem. So a New York Times poll came out. This was, I believe, November 5th. And what they found here is Trump is leading Biden in 5 of the 6 swing states: Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Those are all states Biden won in 2020. Now, Trump is leading him in all of those states. Biden led Trump in Wisconsin, but is down 4 points in Pennsylvania, 5 in Arizona, 6 in Georgia, 5 in Michigan, and 10 in Nevada. 71% say Biden was too old, including 54% of Biden's own supporters say he's too old. So look, my point here is, yeah, you could be selective or cherry pick or be somewhat dismissive of some of the polls. But when you look at all of them in their totality, don't act like there's not a problem here. Because again, what this reminds me of is almost like the cocksure arrogance in 2016, where, well, obviously Hillary's going to... Now remember, this is coming from a guy, it wasn't that long ago that I was saying Biden had a 60% chance of winning, Trump had a 40% chance of winning. I had Biden as a pretty solid favorite. But now I think it's the reverse. Now I think it's Trump 60%, Biden 40%, it might even be Trump 65, Biden 35. And like this attitude is the exact attitude that might help facilitate a loss. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, I am at the point now where I think almost any Democrat, any generic Democrat, would fare better in the election than Biden. Because you mix in these horrible poll numbers, terrible in the swing states. When you go direct issue for direct issue, he's really underwater. Like, you ask about the economy, you ask about foreign policy, you ask about immigration. On each individual issue, Trump is eating his lunch. And you look at that and you think, yeah, if you just take a random Democrat, if Biden drops out and whichever Democrat wins it, even if it's somebody I don't like at all, just the fact that he's not the optics, like not a million years old and not currently backing a genocide in Gaza, right? Like, it just, things that are actually really important, I do think any generic Democrat would beat Trump and do way better. And it's kind of amazing to me that this hasn't become the majority position, even in the media. That's kind of surprising to me because I do find the evidence overwhelming. Now, by the way, am I saying it's impossible Biden wins? No, of course not. But you can only ignore so much of the evidence. Like, how would Joe Scarborough respond to the fact that Biden had 59% support among Arab Americans and Muslim Americans? Now that's down to 17%. 17%. Biden is hemorrhaging young voters. And he needs them desperately in order to win. He's hemorrhaging them. Among Latinos, he should have a 30 or 40-point lead. You know what his lead is? 4 points. So, I mean, what else is there to say, man? Like, he's being very smug and dismissive. But the fact of the matter is, in a world that made sense, Biden would be up 15 points, and he would be up 15 points because he got Build Back Better through, because he wasn't supporting a genocide in Gaza, because he was campaigning. He's not even campaigning. I've never heard him say, Trump has 91 criminal charges. I've never heard him say that. That's insane. Your opponent has 91 criminal charges. You never bring that up? Your opponent said, I want to suspend the Constitution. You never bring that up? Like, he's not campaigning, and his polls are horrible, and it's like, I don't know what you're expecting to happen. It's like they're really relying on the fact that we hope Trump is going to be in prison by the time the election happens. And yeah, in that instance, Biden would win. Any Democrat. You could run a ham sandwich, and the ham sandwich would win. But if that doesn't happen, we're in trouble, and you're rolling the dice with having a hardcore authoritarian win. It's truly unacceptable. It's truly pathetic. But you can't deny all these polls. You can't deny all this evidence. If you want to say, hey, certain ones don't count for certain specific reasons, I'm open to that conversation. But rejecting all of this, I don't buy it. And again, I'm the guy who was defending Biden for a while, saying I think he's the favorite. But that absolutely has changed recently. And they're refusing to acknowledge it. Because the main thing is here, for Democrats to win the Electoral College, they've had to win the popular vote by like 4 points. And we're looking at a situation where, on average, Trump is up 2 points. So that's a full 6 points off of where he needs to be. To sort of shake them out of their complacency, think about this. This is the most up Trump has been on anybody at any point in his political career campaigning. He was never up an average of 2 on Hillary, ever. He was never up an average of 2 on Biden the last time around. Never. This is the most up he's ever been. And Morning Joe just poo-poos it. It's that like smug, condescending, arrogant MSNBC resistance liberalism. And it's, I don't know. It sort of strikes me as suicidal, right? Like, really, you can't acknowledge that almost anybody else would probably be better. It's just purposefully obtuse. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.